Today is Bridget Bishop Day. On June 10th, 1692, Bridget was hanged in Salem, Massachusetts for the capital crime of witchcraft. In recognition of her, we have prepared a short biography and a chronology of events in the Salem Witch Trials involving Bridget.
The woman known as Bridget Bishop, or Bridget Oliver, was born as Bridget Playfair in England.
On April 13th, 1660, Bridget married Samuel Wasselby at St. Mary in the Marsh in Norwich, England.
The couple had a son named Benjamin, who was baptized October 6, 1663, but likely died young, as this is the only record of him.
Sometime in 1664, Bridget made the voyage to Boston, Massachusetts. Samuel Wasselby died around this time, somewhere between April 1664 and January 10th, 1665, when he was recorded as deceased in the birth entry for the couple's second child, a daughter named Mary. There are no more records of Mary's life, so she also may have died young.
On July 26, 1666, Bridget married Thomas Oliver in Salem. Like Bridget, Thomas was from Norwich.
Daughter Christian was born to the Olivers on May 8th, 1667. In addition to Christian, Thomas had 3 adult children from his previous marriage.
Bridget and Thomas had a difficult relationship, with arguments becoming violent. In January 1670, the couple was ordered to pay a fine for this behavior.
In 1677, another fight broke out, and Bridget was heard calling Thomas an old rogue and an old devil. They were both prosecuted for this and sentenced to stand in the market on a Thursday lecture day for maximum exposure and public shaming. While they stood there for an hour, they were gagged and wore papers on their foreheads with their crimes written for all the people to see.
Thomas died by the summer of 1679. He never wrote a will, so the court appointed Bridget executor of his estate, which was heavily burdened by nearly 40 pounds in debt owed to people back in England and in Massachusetts, including Josh's ancestor, Dr. Job Swinnerton of Salem.
Bridget was arrested for alleged witchcraft the first time in 1680. At this point, her accuser was Juan, an enslaved person owned by John Ingersoll.
Juan accused Bridget of bewitching a team of horses so that they ran into a swamp, something which other witnesses also blamed on witchcraft.
Juan also claimed to have seen Bridget's specter in a cowhouse and to have unsuccessfully attacked the specter with a pitchfork.
Bridget's case was referred to the Court of Assistants, the upper house of the legislature, but also the court which tried cases involving capital crimes.
Bridget paid bond to stay out of jail while she awaited a trial which most likely never happened, probably due to insufficient evidence. After the referral, no further record exists to show either a trial or a punishment.
However, witchcraft suspicions continued to grow among Bridget's neighbors, as shown in the testimony given when she again faced witchcraft prosecution in 1692.
Nevertheless, life went on, and Bridget married Edward Bishop around 1685.
Her daughter Christian Oliver married a sailor named Thomas Mason in May of 1686, and a granddaughter, Susanna Mason, was born on August 23, 1687.
On March 6, 1688, Bridget was presented in court on suspicion of theft. Because her husband and William Reeves posted bond, Bridget avoided having to sit in jail while awaiting her trial. No record exists to show that this case was actually heard, so it may also have been dismissed.
On April 18, 1692, John Putnam Jr. and Ezekiel Cheever complained against Bridget Bishop and 3 others for afflicting Elizabeth Hubbard, Mary Walcott, Mercy Lewis, and Ann Putnam Jr. The suspects, including Bridget, were arrested the same day and taken to Ingersoll's Tavern in Salem Village. That night, Mercy Lewis claimed she was visited by Bridget's specter.
The next day, the 4 suspects were questioned by magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin. Bridget's examination was recorded by both Ezekiel Cheever and Samuel Parris. During the examination, at least 5 afflicted persons claimed Bridget was torturing them, and Mary Walcott claimed her brother Jonathan had slashed at Bridget's specter with a sword, tearing a petticoat. In court, Bridget Bishop's skirts were examined, and indeed there was a tear in a petticoat. However, it didn't really look like a sword's work, but Jonathan Walcott said he had left the sword in its scabbard when he had swung.
John Hathorne said, "They say you bewitched your first husband to death," which Bridget denied.
Samuel Braybrook affirmed that she told him today that she had been accounted a witch these 10 years, but she was no witch. The devil cannot hurt her.
In the two accounts, Bridget is quoted as saying that she was innocent and did not even know what a witch was. Further, she had never been to Salem Village and knew none of her accusers.
Bridget also said, "I am innocent. I know nothing of it. I have done no witchcraft.
"I never did hurt them in my life. I did never see these persons before. I am as innocent as the child unborn."
I have made no contract with the devil. I never saw him in my life.
"I do tell the truth. I never hurt these persons in my life. I never saw them before."
I am not come here to say I am a witch to take away my life.
"I am innocent of being a witch. I know no man, woman, or child here."
I know nothing of it. I do not know whether there be any witches or no.
"I take all this people to witness that I am clear."
I never saw these persons before, nor I never was in this place before.
"I have no familiarity with the devil."
I am clear. If I were any such person, you should know it.
"I am innocent of a witch."
I hope I am not guilty of murder.
Also on April 19th, Elizabeth Hubbard gave testimony about Bridget Bishop and Mary Warren. Elizabeth claimed Mary Warren and Bridget Bishop came to her while she was writing some testimony about Mary Warren, bringing her the Devil's Book.
On April 27th, the devil allegedly visited Susanna Sheldon, along with the specters of Mary English, Giles Corey, and Bridget Bishop, who brought along familiars. Bridget's was a snake.
Susanna was visited by the specters of Mary English, Bridget Bishop, Giles Corey, and Martha Corey on April 29th, and Bridget's specter claimed responsibility for killing several women, including John Trask's wife. Evidently, Susanna Sheldon didn't get the memo that Trask actually suspected Sarah Bishop, an unrelated woman who lived in Salem Village.
On May 3rd, Deliverance Hobbs claimed Bridget Bishop had tempted her to sign the devil's book and later to deny her confession to witchcraft.
On May 17th, Susanna Sheldon described the times in April when Bridget and others had supposedly come to her spectrally. She described the devil as a black man with a high-crowned hat. Susanna said that Bridget's specter offered her the devil's book and told her that she'd been a witch more than 20 years. Then a streaked snake crept over her shoulder and into her bosom. Next, the Giles Corey and Bridget Bishop specters knelt before the devil and prayed. The black man told Susanna Sheldon Bridget had been a witch 20.5 years. When Bridget had next appeared on April 29th, she'd confessed to 4 murders, including the 2 Foster's wives.
On May 30th, Samuel Gray testified against Bridget, saying that she had appeared in his chamber one night after he'd been asleep a while. She stood ominously between his bed and the cradle for a moment before disappearing. He unlocked his door and went out and saw the woman again. She vanished when he spoke. Later that night, he was between awakeness and sleep when he felt something cold against his lips and opened his eyes to see the woman holding something to his mouth. She moved then, and the child in the cradle cried, which continued all night. The baby then lived several months in a sad condition until it died. A week or less after the child's death, Samuel saw Bridget. He knew her face and recognized her clothes as those worn by the woman who had visited in the night.
William Stacy also testified on May 30th that Bridget once paid him 3 pence for some work he did, but he didn't get far before the money vanished from his pocket. Naturally, it had to be witchcraft that made the money disappear. Another time, Bridget asked him whether his father would grind her grist. She was worried because people counted her a witch. Immediately after she departed, he set off with the cart and made it only 6 rods, about 99 feet, before the wheel slumped or sunk into a hole. After he received assistance getting the wheel out of the hole, he resumed his walk, but looking back, he could not see any hole.
He testified that in the winter about midnight, he felt something cold between his lips pressing hard against his teeth, which woke him. He got up and sat on his bed, but saw Bridget or someone in her shape sitting on the foot of the bed. This shape wore a black cap and a black hat and a red coat with two eeks of two colors. The figure then left.
Another time, William Stacy was going to the barn when he was suddenly taken or hoisted from the ground, thrown against a stone wall, and then thrown down a bank.
In another incident, Williams said that he'd seen Bridget shortly before his horse's gear and tackle came all undone and his cart fell.
He said he also met with several other pranks from Bridget, but he was most concerned that she had killed his daughter Priscilla with her witchcraft.
On May 31st, Joseph Safford accused Bridget of bewitching his wife in company with Elizabeth Howe.
On June 1st, Mary Warren and Abigail and Deliverance Hobbs testified against 12 people, including Bridget Bishop. These supposed witches had attended a general meeting of the witches in the field near Mr. Parris's house 2 or 3 nights before, and they had tried to get Mary Warren to attend such a meeting 2 weeks earlier.
That same day, June 1st, Sarah Churchill claimed that Bridget Bishop confessed to her that she had killed John Trask's child, and Mary Warren charged Bridget with bringing her the Devil's Book.
On June 2nd, Bridget Bishop was physically inspected for teats or witch marks.
The jury of women who searched Bridget discovered a preternatural excrescence of flesh between the pudendum and anus, much like to teats and not usual in women.
3 or 4 hours later, the woman examined Bridget again and found her in a clear and free state from any preternatural excrescence.
Bridget was indicted that day for afflicting Mercy Lewis, Abigail Williams, Elizabeth Hubbard, and Ann Putnam Jr.
Then came testimony from John Cook, John Louder, Samuel Shattuck, Sarah Shattuck, John Bly Sr., William Bly, Rebecca Bly, Richard Coleman, and Susanna Sheldon.
John Cook claimed he saw Bridget in his chamber early one morning, and she walloped him on the head. He saw her later that day as well, but nobody else with him could see her.
John Louder said that in around 1684 or 1685 maybe, he had quarreled with Bridget about some of her fowls that used to come into the orchard and garden where he was living. After this argument one night, he was awakened by a heavy weight on his chest. He awoke and saw Bridget Bishop sitting upon his abdomen. She choked him, and he could not move.
Another time soon after, he was in a locked room when he saw a black pig approach. He went to the pig and tried to kick it, but it vanished. Next, a thing like a monkey jumped in the window. It was black with a face like a man's and feet like a rooster's feet. The monkey rooster man spoke and told John, "I am a messenger sent to you, for I understand you are troubled in mind, and if you will be ruled by me, you shall want for nothing in this world." John tried to grab it in his hands, saying, "You devil, I will kill you." However, he felt no substance, and it jumped out the window again before returning by the porch. This time it said, "You had better take my counsel." John now struck at it with a stick, but struck the ground sill and broke the stick. When the creature vanished, John looked out the door and saw Bridget Bishop, his neighbor, but did not have the power to leave the room. So he turned around, and the creature was back, poised to pounce on him. John shouted, "The whole armor of God be between me and you," and the thing left.
Samuel and Sarah Shattuck testified that in 1680, Bridget used to make excuses to come to their house. Around this time, the couple's eldest daughter was taken in a very drooping condition. The more Bridget came to the house, the worse the kid got. Eventually, the parents perceived his understanding decayed so that they feared, as it has since proved, that he would be quite bereft of his wits.
Sometime during the child's affliction, a stranger came to the Shaddocks and told them the child was bewitched by a neighbor, which the Shaddocks took to mean Bridget.
John Bly Sr. and William Bly said that while they were tearing down cellar walls at Bridget's house in about 1685, they discovered hidden poppets made up of rags and hog's bristles with headless pins in them with the points outward.
Rebecca Bly and John Bly Sr. claimed their sow was afflicted soon after a quarrel with Bridget.
Richard Coleman testified that around late May or early June of 1684, Bridget and two other women came into his marital chamber at night while he lay in bed with his wife. He recognized Bridget because she came in her red peregrine bodice and the rest of her clothing that she then usually did wear.
Bridget allegedly came over and lay upon Richard's breast or body and so oppressed him that he could not speak nor stir. Soon after, Richard's kinsman, William Coleman, decided to test if the women would come if he were there with Richard. He also advised Richard to lay his sword across his body. So the three women came, struck William powerless, and tried to take the sword. Richard called for his wife, William Coleman, and Sarah Phillips, who was sharing a bed with Goody Coleman. All later told him that they could hear him, but couldn't move at that time. Eventually, Sarah Phillips said, "In the name of God, Goodman Coleman, what is the matter with you?" At this, the three spectral women vanished.
Susanna Sheldon said that on June 2nd, she saw Bridget Bishop's apparition and the ghosts of two little children who said they were Thomas Green's twins and that Bridget had murdered them.
And Bridget was also tried on June 2nd, 1692, and convicted.
On June 8th, Chief Justice William Stoughton signed a warrant for Bridget's execution, which would be the first of the Salem witch hunt.
Bridget was hanged on June 10th, 1692, between 8 a.m. and noon at Proctor's Ledge on Gallows Hill in Salem.
Over the years, many have confused Bridget Bishop with Sarah Bishop. The two both happened to be married to men named Edward Bishop. Bridget Playfer Walselby Oliver Bishop lived in Salem town.
Sarah Wilds Bishop lived in Salem Village, and her husband Edward ran an unlicensed tavern where people drank and played shuffleboard late into the night.
Today, Bridget is the protagonist of the play Cry Innocent, which is produced by History Alive. She is remembered by her courage in maintaining her innocence despite intense pressure. She refused to belie herself and give a false confession to things she'd never done.
On October 31st, 2001, Bridget Bishop was exonerated by name, along with 4 other women who'd been left out of previous exonerations. Her memory is honored today by monuments in Salem and Danvers, Massachusetts.
Bridget's DNA lives on in her descendants. Her daughter, Christian Oliver Mason, unfortunately did not live long after Bridget, dying sometime before November 1st, 1693, when her widowed husband remarried.
Edward Bishop was appointed guardian for Christian's daughter, Susanna Mason, in April 1694.
In September 1711, Susanna married John Becket, a shipwright.
Susanna Mason Becket, grandchild of Bridget Bishop, lived until at least 1769 and had at least one daughter, Susanna Becket Babbage, who was widowed at the age of 31 and lived off her income as a teacher of reading and sewing. She raised 7 children and several grandchildren before she died in 1804 at the age of 90. Her grandchildren were the great-great-great-grandchildren of Bridget Playfer Walselby Oliver Bishop. Are you a descendant of Bridget Bishop? Please tell us.